Welcome to another edition of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me this week, former or current Cinderella frontman Tom Keifer and Bill Leverty of FireHouse to discuss all of this. Good day, Bill. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me, Mitch. What a great pleasure it is to be here with such a great interview with one of my favorite singers in our genre, Tom Keifer.
Oh, yeah. Well, an absolute master of the genre. And he gave me a half-hour interview, and we covered all kinds of topics, working with producer Andy John, his solo album, The Way Life Goes, the future of Cinderella, the different drummers that Cinderella used, just on and on, just chock full of information, tidbits, hints, clues. It's a great episode. Great episode. And of course, it's brought to you by the Heavy Montreal Festival taking place August 7th, 8th, and 9th at Parc Jean Drapeau in beautiful downtown Montreal. Headlined this year by Korn, Faith No More, and Slipknot. Other bands on the bill include Lamb of God, Iggy Pop, Billy Talent, Extreme, Dokken, Warrant, Bullet for My Valentine, and much more. And of course, missing from the lineup is FireHouse and Tom Keifer, sadly. But we'll change that someday, right?
Yeah, well, with your help, I sure appreciate it, brother.
I keep pushing for that. Now, you've had a chance to be around Tom and the guys in Cinderella many years. You've done the Rock Never Stops tour with the guys. You've done other shows, festival dates, and so on and so forth. Tell me a little bit about Tom and your experience.
Well, he's always been a super cool guy to me. I mean, the first time I met him was when they were opening up for Bon Jovi, and we got to hang out with Tom, and he was just so cool. And then, lo and behold, in 2005, we did the Rock Never Stops tour. I remember going into sound check for the first day of the tour and watching them sound check and listening to how great it sounded. I mean, the band sounded so good. Their background vocals sounded awesome. I mean, all those guys sing so well. And then there's Tom, who's like this musical genius who plays like 45 different instruments all really well, and then gets up there and sings like nobody else can sing. I mean, he's got a voice all his own. And the one tidbit I will say that I remember is that about halfway through the tour, I used to watch him sound check every night because I'm just like to learn, and I was watching Tom every day get out his Telecaster and he'd start playing some country kind of sounding licks. And he had this one in particular, and I had never heard it before, and I was just so intrigued by the sound of this way he was playing this phrase. And I finally got him to come into our dressing room and show me the guitar lick. And it was such a cool thing. It's a hybrid picking thing where you pick and you use your fingers, and it's a bendy kind of thing. It sounds like a lap steel. I mean, like a pedal steel lick. And so I have to say that I borrowed that lick and put it on my Southern Exposure album on a song on there. So I'm not sure Tom knows about that, but I got to footnote and credit him in some way. And
well, you're doing it now.
I put that one little lick in this song where it breaks down, and it's got that Tom Keifer lick on there, and it's just a really cool part of the song. So I thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and he taught you the whole thing, right? He sat down and showed you how to play it.
He showed me the lick, and I feel like I owe him at least $50.
Yeah, but Tom's great, and the new album is fantastic too. A lot of those songs were demoed with Cinderella back in the early 2000s, and it took a while for this album, like Tom says in the interview. It took 9 years for this album to get put together and released, but it really is a great thing, and it's nice to see him back on the road. He has this vocal cord paralysis, and we talk about it in the interview, and he's had to sort of learn to re-sing, and he's got different exercises he does to warm up and stuff, and the fact that he can still sound as if he was 22 despite the age, despite the vocal paralysis, is a testament to this man's talent.
Well, I tell you what, we opened up for him, the Tom Keifer band, at the Full Throttle Saloon at Sturgis last year, and from start to finish, they sounded awesome. I was blown away. I just was knocked out at how great they sounded from the first note. Yeah, he talked to me at the end of the Cinderella tour, or the Rock Never Stops tour that we did with them, about that vocal issue that he had. And but that whole tour in 2005, he never missed a note. I mean, he sounded amazing. And then, you know, I saw him, you know, again, like I said, last year we did the Sturgis show. He sounded better than I'd ever heard him. So it was just, you know, he's definitely been doing his homework.
Yeah, and I'd love to see Cinderella back on the road, but that 2005 Rock Never Stops. I saw the show in Toronto. Of course, we had Quiet Riot and Rat on the bill. And, you know, I say this often in interviews, no disrespect to anybody else, but I really think Cinderella stole that show. They were just a powerhouse. And his voice, I mean, the whole set is really led by his voice. And sounded great. Great band. You know, and hey, new album.
They've always been a great band, and they definitely have the chemistry, and they have, you know, everybody in that band sings so well.
Yep.
Just a magic chemistry they have.
Yeah, but he's got his new touring band, and they're doing, of course, Tom Keifer solo dates, hopefully for us in Canada, and of course in, you know, Europe and Japan. Hopefully he'll start getting outside of the US, because it's certainly something to see. And if you haven't picked it up, the album The Way Life Goes came out in 2013. It is a fine piece of work. It definitely needs to be checked out. And we are talking with Tom Keifer. Good day, Tom. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. How are you?
Good. I think we last spoke and saw each other like in 2006, but glad to have you here now.
Well, good to be here.
So let's talk about this new album. It came out a couple of years ago, actually, in 2013, The Way Life Goes. Is that something you want to do more of, solo albums, or at some point would you like to get back into a band situation?
Well, I feel like I'm in a band situation. I like the band that I put together for the tour, and it's been the same band for the last couple of years we've been touring, and we've kind of grown pretty tight together. And I've been starting to write again, and I can see some collaborating in the future here with the band I've been touring with. So yeah, I think definitely there'll be some new music coming soon this year, and even into next year we'll still be touring. We're starting to look at some stuff for next year. We've already taken the Def Leppard cruise for the solo band, and our schedule's starting to really thicken up for this year, from the summer through the fall. We've got a lot of stuff dropping into place in the schedule, so we're just, you know, the record took a long time to make, so we're not really in any, it's not like something that I just want to throw at the wall and tour 6 months and then go make another one. You know, the record took 9 years. So honestly, when we released it in 2013, I didn't see us being out touring as long as we have, but it's just taken on an energy, and it seems to be growing and growing with every show we go out, because there's a word of mouth that's happening now on social media. I never had a social media prior to this record, and that's been growing, and we've had a lot of radio airplay, and the label's been great with all the publicity stuff. So it's been kind of a slow build, but we feel it with each show, you know, the intensity of it. So it still feels like it has life, and as long as it does, we're going to keep going. And then at that point, when it starts to phase out, there'll be time for some new music.
Yeah, in fact, let's explore that the thing that it took 9 years to do. Songs like Fool's Paradise, Cold Day in Hell, Solid Ground, Thick and Thin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they were part of the Sony Portrait Cinderella album that never materialized. Is that correct?
Well, these songs were written in different periods of time. Okay. I mean, you know, I wrote songs for, you know, the record. Some of them were written after that period. Some of them were written during that period, and there were a few of these songs that were demoed by Cinderella. But none of those tracks are what's on my record. They were all recut.
They were all recut. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. This is all. They're completely different tracks.
Okay, but the genesis was back for that project or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of these songs were written then, and some of them were demoed with Cinderella. But honestly, the majority of them were not.
Right. No, I know. I remember those from back in the day because.
Yeah. No, I think there might even be some demos floating around from that. But
isn't the internet a wonderful thing? What does it allow you to do to be in a solo artist position, to just call yourself Tom Keifer rather than to be Cinderella? What does that allow you to do?
Well, I mean, I create the same way, really. Okay. You know, for me, it all starts with a song, and the song usually starts with lyrics first. And then the process for me is kind of growing from the lyric, you know, putting the riffs around it, and you write a song, and then you know, get into the studio and try and bring out of the studio monitors what you're hearing in your head when you first got that inspiration. And sometimes that can be a challenge, and sometimes it happens very easily. And I think most people who go in to record music will tell you that, you know, some just fall out and it's there and others don't, you know. And I think when you get into the studio with a band and a group of musicians and producers and engineers, it's a collaborative effort to try and produce the music, play and produce the music, you know, a song that's been written. I never write in the studio. I always come in with a song that's finished in terms of the lyrics and melodies and riffs and stuff. But, you know, there's another process, you know, of actually getting a performance out of a band and production and what you want it to actually sound and feel like. So that's always like you know, for me, the best way to do that is always collaborative between producers, engineers, the musicians, the band. So, you know, I work very much in the same way. You know, I didn't go solo because for any kind of like searching for some kind of creative freedom or anything. You know, I had tons of creative freedom in Cinderella. I mean, I wrote most of the material and did most of the guitar work and sang it. And, you know, I mean, there wasn't any, you know, it's not about leaving because there was something I felt like creatively I was missing or something, you know.
You mentioned leaving. Is that then final then for Cinderella? Is the band over, or do you think at some point there could be a reunion show or a reunion tour, or, you know, on the cruise or something?
There's no, I mean, the only thing I can say about that right now is there's no discussions or talks for anything in the future with Cinderella right now.
Okay. In terms of writing for the next album, when do you think that we might see a future Tom Keifer album?
It's hard to say because I think I take things one day at a time. I will say last year I started writing again, and it had been a while since I'd really written anything because this record took so long and it was such a labor of love. And, you know, you just kind of feel burnt when you spent a lot of time on a record between the writing and the producing. So I always need that, like, get away from it for a while. So being on the road, out playing some new music and actually getting like response to it and, you know, people accepting it, you know, is a good thing for you after you go through struggling to make a record. So that's been a positive thing. And it you know, I kind of got inspired last year and started writing again. So I'm far from having a record complete, and I want to collaborate with some other writers and stuff again, like I did on this record. But so far the process has started with me just kind of writing myself. Right. And with a couple other people too. But I haven't really dove back into the deep end of writing yet, but I'm getting there. And, you know, that switch can turn on very quickly, you know, so that's why I say it's hard to say when, you know. Right now we're kind of in it, you know, up to our eyes with touring and still promoting this and staying on top of keeping this vital because it's something we still really believe in.
Yeah. And it's a great album, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Over the years, you've had vocal issues. You've even had to cancel shows and tours because of it. Since 2013, since the album's come out, there doesn't seem to have been any, which, you know, fantastic news. But how is the voice? Is there anything you have to do to take care of it? Do you not talk during shows? I mean, before shows, do you need 6 months off of doctor's ordered rest? I mean, how is the voice?
The voice is as strong as ever now. But that said, the root problem or the root cause of all the problems I had was a neurological condition.
Okay.
that I was hit with in the early 90s, and it's called a paralysis, which is a fancy medical term for a partial paralysis.
Okay.
So I had a left vocal cord paralysis, which is no cure for medically, surgery or medicine. There's nothing they can do to cure it. And I was told I would never sing again. So it's a really serious thing to happen to a singer. Most people who get it don't sing again. And the doctor who delivered that news to me told me that if I had any prayer or chance of singing again, that I would have to start working with speech pathologists and vocal coaches and try to retrain the vocal cord to respond properly. So, a long story short, after years of battling and going to every witch doctor, vocal coach, everything, trying to figure out, how to get around this lame cord, I've finally, over the years, it's gotten stronger and stronger, and now it's probably as strong on a good night or stronger than it's ever been. But that said, the condition's still there, so I have to do these exercises every day that take, an hour and a half of therapy and exercises to keep it strong and remind that cord, because the root problem of it wanting to not work properly will always be there. But I've found a workout routine for it that keeps it working, but I have to do it every day. Even on the show day, my warm-ups and therapy are probably as long as the show.
Is there a chance or a risk that it might flare up and you'll be unable to sing?
I hope not.
And I hope not too. But
it's still challenging. I mean, it's not. And people come and hear me sing now, and they say, you sound better than ever, and I'm so grateful to hear that. But it's not without a lot of effort each day, and it's still not without a lot of risk, because when you sing at that kind of intensity and you're singing on something that has an inherent weakness, I pray a lot. So
yeah. Well, listen, as a fan of yours from the early days, I mean, I remember seeing you open for Bon Jovi and all those club days before. God, I can't imagine my life without Tom Keifer and Cinderella in it. So please, let's keep it strong. First album, let's go back there. Night Songs, way back. Andy Johns was the producer, having done Blind Faith, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, and more. How, first of all, did you get Andy to produce your record, and what was that like working with a man with such pedigree?
Well, it's funny because all the records that you mentioned that he did, the just historic, Zeppelin and the Stones and all that, I was familiar with all those records, but at that period in my time, I didn't really know, I don't think I even knew what a producer was or what they did. So when we signed the record deal and it was like, well, now you need a producer, it's like, okay, what do they do? Well, it's kind of like everything, dude. So, it was a bit of an education, and I didn't know who produced the records that I loved growing up, the ones that you mentioned that Andy worked on and all. So our manager started just kind of like suggesting people and playing records, or giving me records and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? So he gave me a record by a band called Stone Fury, which was Lenny Wolf,
right?
A German band.
From Kingdom Come.
Yeah, Kingdom Come, yeah. They later changed it. I think they were called Stone Fury in the beginning, the first record. And Andy produced it. And I didn't know who Andy was, and I didn't know that he had produced all the records that I loved. I just was at my house, and I put on this record, and I listened to it, and I was like, this sounds fucking amazing. And I called my manager and said, let's get this guy. And I said, who is he? And he said, who is he? He said, he's worked with a couple little bands you might know. And I'm like, who? He's like, well, the Stones and Zeppelin. And he just started naming them all. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. So that's how it happened, and then, I met him, and Andy's passed on, and we were very close. And that was a pretty tough news to get a couple of years back. But he and I just, hit it off, and we're great buds and worked really closely together in the studio. And I learned everything from him about production and sounds and counterpoint and instrumentation and all that stuff. So it was just amazing. You couldn't have had a better teacher, for your first record, to have Andy Johns come in and be your mentor.
Your mentor.
It was just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just a one-of-a-kind guy. I mean, I don't know if you've ever met Andy, but he was quite the character. So every day was very colorful, and you never knew what the fuck was going to happen. So,
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but he was almost like a living cartoon character, right? I mean, he just was full of love.
he was a
Yeah,
character, yeah. He was a
yeah,
character.
but just an
He had more
incredible.
passion. He had more passion for music than anyone I've ever met in my life. I mean, we'd worked 14 and 15-hour days. I remember working up in Woodstock and Bearsville, and they had, all the cottages and stuff. You'd stay right on the premises, and we would just go up there and just woodshed and just work our asses off. And, we'd work long, long days and go have a dinner. And by then, everyone was ready to just fall out and just not hear any music, and then late at night you'd hear Andy in his room just blasting the roughs and studying them. And, he just never stopped. He was so passionate about what he did. And that's contagious.
Yeah, and he certainly helped you make a stellar debut album. And I'll ask you another Cinderella question if you don't mind. The one thing I've always been curious about is the live band has always had Fred Curry on drums, or maybe except for the Still Climbing tour, but you've had Cozy Powell, Kenny Aronoff, Kevin Valentine, Jay Harmon, Jim Durnak, and others. What was it about the drumming situation in studio where you needed to go to these other guys?
Well, that's producers make those calls, and I think people would be surprised how many times that happens. A lot of bands aren't public about it.
Right.
But, to me, a band is about, and I'm not going to mention any bands, but there's some big bands I can think of right now that I know, it's just about getting on tape what their vision is,
Right.
And I think being a band is more like being a gang.
Right.
And, you get in there and the studio is, what you record in those grooves is forever. So, when Cozy came in, a lot of the drum parts were stuff that, Fred had worked out, and there were creative drum parts that he had thought of that Cozy played too. Fred wasn't as experienced in the studio, and Andy felt that, so he wanted, he wanted to use somebody else. But we kept Fred in the band because he was part of the band, part of the gang, and we toured with him, and he had creative input on the drumming on that record. So, I think that's the mark of, let me just put it this way: it's more common in the business than you realize.
Well, no. In fact, I realize that. I mean, if you look
but we were public about it,
right?
Because I always felt if a musician plays on something, they should get credit for it.
Right, and I'll just say this. I mean, if you look at KISS, for example, in the 1980s, they're really a decade of Paul Stanley solo albums, and then you've got all kinds of people on there, from Jean Beauvoir to Alan Schwartz. I mean, there's just a cornucopia of different musicians. It is what it is. I've just always found that interesting.
You're in there painting a picture, and you're trying to create something that is forever.
Right.
So, and usually the people who are the most conscious of that are the producers, because they're more objective than, when I write a song, when I go in to record it, with the band, you're hearing it come to life for the first time. So you're just excited, and you're willing to accept almost anything at first, right? That's why you need a producer to say, look, this is good, but there's better. Right. We can do better than this. And that's why you need a producer, because as a songwriter, when you first start, I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me where I write a song and you're going in to do a demo and you just go, oh God, that's it. There it is. Man, that could be the record. And then you actually go record the record and you go back and listen to the demo and you go, wow, that sounds like shit.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that. Is it important for bands or artists like yourself to have an outside producer? Because, a lot of the classic bands have gotten to making their own productions, right? They're self-produced now. Is that a sort of a recipe for disaster, not to have those other ears in there?
I think some people can do it. I'm not one. I don't like it. I preferred working with Andy and Gary Lyons and John Jansen and
right.
Dwayne and John, and Dwayne Barron and John Purdell. I loved working with. I like collaborating with talented, creative people, right, where you're pooling everyone together and trying to get the best thing coming out of those speakers. There are some people who are just I had amazing producers that I worked with. When we started The Way Life Goes, it wasn't even really a record. It was on the heels of that Sony project, as he called it,
Right.
and we were
The Sony disaster, right?
Yeah, it was a lawsuit.
Uh-huh.
It was had re-record restrictions where the band couldn't record as a band, but we could solo. The record started off. My solo record started off as more as a healing process because it was like, man, we went through so much crap legally and so much crap getting jerked around by Sony and certain people there who will remain nameless.
Right.
That I just wanted to make music without lawyers involved, without anyone. I just wanted to do whatever the fuck I wanted to do. So I've been writing with a lot of people here in Nashville, and I've been meeting a lot of incredible musicians here. And my wife is an amazing songwriter, so we started writing together. And then we started going out in our studio and recording some of the stuff, just a track at a time here and there. And got caught up in that syndrome quite a few times that I mentioned where it's like, oh, listen to that. There it is, right? But then I'd go on the road for a while, was still touring with Cinderella, and come back and listen to it fresh and go, it's a great idea, but it's not there yet.
Right.
And that's something that a producer can get you from that point A to point B a lot quicker because they're more objective. So that's part of the reason that, this record took so long, because it is self-produced. Savannah and I and Chuck Turner was very objective, was the third producer on the project, and he's a very talented guy, but, he got close to things too. And, we were on and off of it. We would take long breaks, which Pro Tools allows you to do because you can just hit close session and save. And I could go on tour for 6 months and then come back and hear what we really had. And some of it was great, and others would be like, this needs to be redone, or
right.
Let's rewrite this section that's not quite right. And just a great producer would get you from point A to point B a lot faster. So, but I don't regret the way we did the record because there was no pressure. Because there was no label involved. There was no pressure to have it done at any particular time.
No, it turned out great.
So it was, we were able to just keep working on it till it was exactly how we wanted it. And then woke up one day and was like, hey, this is a record, So, and then we shopped it and found Merrivy Records, and it's, it's just been kind of been a magical ride ever since we signed with them. It's just been a lot of cool stuff that's happened. So.
Well, very, very much so, especially with the fact that we're still talking about it 2 years later, because a lot of albums come out on Monday, and by Friday, nobody's talking about it anymore. So, staying power.
Part of that's the commitment of the artist, too.
True.
Eddie Trunk and I were talking about that recently, off air and on air, actually, recently. Right. And, he was saying how, he gets interviews booked for records that are coming out, and by the time the artists get to the studio, they're already broken up and the record's over. Yeah. So he was kind of, he told Savannah and I that he was proud of us for continuing to be committed to this record. And it's funny, when he said that, I thought about it, and I thought, well, being on the road a couple of years to support a record, I've never, with Cinderella, we never released a record that we didn't tour behind for 2.5 years and work the record. So just because the industry is different today, I don't see any reason I'm not going to adhere to that, right. And do what everyone else is doing. It's like I'm having fun supporting this record and being out with the band that we're with, and we don't see any reason to stop.
And we certainly need to get you more into Canada to do a few more shows. I just want to circle back on two things.
Yeah, we really want to. We did Rock the Park last year, and that was great. And we did one show in Toronto, and I'm hoping to get some more up there this year.
Yeah, there's a festival in Montreal called Heavy Montreal. This year, there's a whole bunch of bands, Korn and Faith No More and all that, but there's also Lita Ford, Warrant, Extreme, and Dawkins. And I think having you in there would be great, but I know they're booked for this year, but for 2016, you're definitely somebody that needs to be on that list. Let me just circle back to two things, because I know we have to wrap up soon. Just quickly, did the Sony experience leave you bitter? Because I know you sort of, between 2008 and the release of your record, there was a sort of a 5-year period where there really wasn't much going on. Did it just sort of take the fun out of the whole process for you?
Which period are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about the Sony record deal, because you mentioned there was lawsuits. Did that leave you bitter? I mean, did you just say, "Ugh, I don't want to do this anymore. Leave me alone"? Did you want to walk away?
Well, no. I mean, it didn't leave me bitter in the sense of like, hey, I don't want to make music, because as I described, kind of jumped right back on the horse and started recording and working on this record.
Gotcha.
Unbeknownst to me, it was a record. It was the attitude really was, let's just make some music. Fuck the lawyers, fuck the labels. Let's just go record some shit. And it wasn't. There was no ambition for it, which was kind of nice. There was no release date. There was no.
Right.
This is a record. It was just making music. But eventually it turned into that because we started realizing we had something really good. So no, I mean, it never made me not want to play music. It made me want to produce some music or record some music without any of those fuckers involved,
right.
Meaning lawyers and record companies. So it turned me a little bit bitter towards those kind of people. But not, I mean, no, I mean, I've never,
okay.
No, I wouldn't say it made me bitter. We had an amazing, I know a lot of people are like, oh, fuck record labels and they suck. And, it's like, our experience with Polygram and Mercury Records, that launched a career for us that still is having an impact on our lives today.
Absolutely.
Even though they dropped us, like everyone got dropped at that time, and that wasn't fun to have. But they did right by us for 4 records or 3 records, and I try to always see the positive and move forward. It wasn't easy to get stung the way we did with Sony, because that was kind of like a very hopeful situation that we were going to get to make a record with a real producer and a real label, and it felt like a real situation, and it turned out to not be. So we got our hopes up and worked very hard, invested a lot of our own time and money into demos and working and trying to build the brand back and the band and all, and then kind of got punched in the gut by the label, so that was not easy to take. But no, I think if I was probably mad, but if I was bitter, I don't think I would have just jumped back in and made music again. So.
Okay.
And then it's hard to sort out your emotions about those things because music is an emotional thing for me. I mean, you're writing, you're putting your emotions to music, and then you got to trust them in the hands of people who you barely know.
Right, and then you get a lawyer who slaps a suit on you, and you go, oh, Jesus Christ, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, actually, we slapped the suit on them.
Okay.
So, that's all I'll say about that. But
yeah.
And it got pretty ugly. So.
And let me just move on before we run out of time. Still Climbing came out in '94. Blood from a Stone, Talk is Cheap. Some great tracks on there, but the album just sort of fell off the radar. What's your feelings about that album? Are you proud of it? Do you think it needed extra work? What's your take on it?
I like the record. I think there's some really cool stuff on it. For me, it was a really hard record to write and to record because my vocal paralysis that we spoke about earlier, that hit me right at the end of the Heartbreak Station tour.
Okay.
So that was a period of time where I started to have to start writing for Still Climbing. So I'm trying to write songs and I have no voice. And they're telling me, well, you got to retrain your voice and your voice may end up being a little different. So I don't know what voice I'm writing for Still Climbing. And so that was challenging. I never went through that before. And then, I started kind of getting my voice back, but it wasn't consistent. And by the time we went in to record it, I wasn't able to just step up to the mic and sing down like 4 or 5 full performances and then just go in and kind of comp between those,
right.
Which is how I always did vocals. I mean, I was working with John and Dwayne on that record, like, a line at a time, sometimes even a word at a time because my voice was so fucked up. So it was a challenging record to make. And, I think the more challenging a record is, it's harder for you to be objective or to like it
right.
later. So, it takes me time. It takes a little air for me sometimes between when the record finishes, when you're done making it, and get away from it for a while before you can really appreciate it. But, looking back on it now, there's been plenty of air between.
Right.
And there's good stuff on it.
Yeah, there is. It really is. And
I
then
love the title track. It's one of my favorites, Still Climbing, and the song I wrote for my mom, Hard to Find the Words.
I've always liked Blood from a Stone myself. So
I like that one too. That's a cool, like, minor riff.
yep. And let's just finish with this. I just want to circle back to Cozy Powell, one of the greatest rock drummers. Unfortunately, passed away way too young. Do you have any stories about working with Cozy? Just a little bit about.
Yeah, I mean, he was just, we were just, I mean, it was our second record, and he's like this legendary drummer that came in to work with us. So it was kind of like, when Andy showed up,
Right.
Andy was our legend on the first record, and then the second record we had Cozy Powell walking through the door, and it just great guy, really upbeat and positive, and brought a great energy into the studio. And his chops are just. I mean, I still listen to Long Cold Winter, and just some of those drum fills and chops they're just so tasteful and just so fluent. It's just great musician.
When a guy like Cozy comes into the studio, do you think of him as just a studio musician, or do you say, "Hey, we should hire him as our drummer"? I mean, did those kind of thoughts come into your mind?
No, I mean, like I said, Fred was never, he wasn't out of the band.
Right.
And, honestly, after that experience in the studio, he went and woodshedded, and worked really, really hard. And he played his ass off on that tour.
Yep.
And he came into pre-production for Heartbreak Station. And he played on that record and had great parts and played really well. And, so, we stayed with our guy,
Right.
And I think that was the right thing to do. So
I agree. I love Fred, and what he's doing these
I
days
do
with
too.
the production stuff.
Fred is just, I love Fred.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, absolute pleasure. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Good talking to you.
You too. Bye-bye now.
All right, bye-bye.
There you have it, folks. My interview with Tom Keifer, brought to you, of course, by the Heavy Montreal Festival, taking place August 7th, 8th, and 9th at beautiful Parc Jean Drapeau in downtown Montreal. Slipknot, Faith No More, Korn are your headliners, and of course, Extreme is doing the Porno Graffiti album in full. Now, Bill, during that interview, we talk about Fred Coury, Cinderella's drummer. And have I ever told you the story about Fred Coury from back, my God, 25 years ago?
No.
I'll tell you this.
No, but I can tell you, Fred's awesome, man. He's a great singer, great drummer, great producer, and a great guy. I've always had huge respect for him. So, how'd you meet him?
Well, I'll tell you this. This is, I was probably 18, 19, maybe 20 years old, and went out to Los Angeles for the very, very first time. And of course, when you're a tourist in Los Angeles for the first time, you go to the Hard Rock Cafe. So I went over to the Hard Rock Cafe, and sitting and eating at the table next to me is Fred Coury and his parents. And so I let them eat. I don't believe in disturbing people at restaurants, because especially, rock stars and movie stars, they get disturbed all the time. So, he eats, I eat, and we sort of both finish our meal at the same time. And he gets up to leave, and I say to him, "Hey, you're Fred Coury from Cinderella." And he goes, "Well, yes, I am." And I said, "Listen, I've never met anybody famous. Would you mind giving me an autograph and stuff?" I said, I'm in from Montreal and stuff." And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, Montreal?" He says, "We're playing there soon." And I said, "Well, no, you're not. But of course, as you know, right, bands get their itinerary 3 months, 6 months, a year before the public knows." He goes, "No, trust me, we're playing there in a few months." And I went, "Okay." And he signed my napkin, I think, or my dollar bill, because of course I didn't bring a Cinderella CD in my pocket. And he says, he goes, "Tell you what, when we get to Montreal, you look me up, and I'll get you into the show." And I went, "Oh, sure, okay, whatever." But I don't have a phone number for him. We don't have email back then. And I said, "Okay, whatever." And Cinderella comes to Montreal, and they're at the record store, the HMV, as it was back in the day, and they're doing a signing. And I, as any other fan, stood in line, blah, 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 got to get through. And he looks at me and he goes, "Do I know you? You look familiar." And I said, "Oh, well, we met in Los Angeles like 6 months ago." And he goes, "Oh, the Hard Rock Cafe, right?" And I go, yeah, the Hard Rock Cafe.
Mm.
And he said, are you coming to the show tonight? And I said, oh, I wasn't able to get tickets. And listen, I was 19. I didn't have money and stuff. I said, I wasn't able to. He goes, no. He said, I promise I'd take care of you. You show up to the show tonight. Bring a friend. And I went, okay, sure. And, I live about 60 kilometers, so about 45 miles away from the venue. And I figured, okay, am I really going to drive in for this? But we did. We drove into the Montreal Forum as it was, and 2 tickets were waiting there. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were center red, so good seats, And in there, there's VIP passes to meet the band at the meet and greet after the show. And I was like, oh. And that's always stuck with me because listen, I wasn't a hot girl, a hot chick that he wanted to meet. He probably has fans at the Hard Rock Cafe or wherever he goes, a million fans over saying, hey, all the time. It was 6 or 7 months later. And you know what? He remembered. He went through with his promise. And that's just above and beyond. So he wasn't a bullshitter. He wasn't a fake. It was just a really sort of decent thing to do. And when you're 18, 19, and rock bands are your heroes, the people you look up to, for him to have gone through all that and remembered and gone through on his word, here I am like 30 years later, 25 years later, and I just haven't forgotten the story. I haven't forgotten Fred Curry. And to me, that's Fred Curry. He's just this incredibly nice guy. And since I've gotten into doing the whole interviews, I've had a chance to hang out with him and do interviews and stuff. But I probably have never actually properly said thank you for that. So I'll say it here. Thank you, Fred. That was absolutely a phenomenal thing to do. And, what do you think of that, Bill? I mean, that's above and beyond, right?
Well, it sure is. It's exceptional, but it doesn't surprise me from any one of those 4 guys in Cinderella. They're all exceptional human beings.
Yep.
On top of their musicianship and their vocal ability and their writing, but they are really good people. And the fact that he remembered you and then offered that to you, that sounds just like Fred to me. He's just a total class act. And, yeah.
And I will say one more thing about Fred. After, when Cinderella was doing some off time and stuff, he did these albums with Stephen Pearcy, the arcade albums.
Oh, yeah. The same guy that produced FireHouse's first 2 albums, David Prater, did the arcade.
Yeah.
At least the first one.
If you haven't heard those albums, they are stunning. I mean, Stephen was vocally sounding great. The music was great, and Fred was just playing like a monster. So definitely worth checking out. If you've forgotten about them or never heard about them, check out the arcade records with Stephen and Fred. One more thing that Tom mentioned in the interview was Andy Johns, great producer. I mean, Humble Pie, Joni Mitchell, Rolling Stones, and of course our friend Russ Dwarf and the Killer Dwarfs, their Dirty Weapons album, right? I mean,
I love that album. Yeah. Andy Johns, man, he's just legendary producer. Van Halen. I think you mentioned Led Zeppelin.
LA
he did a couple of LA Guns records. Yeah, he
Blind
did,
Faith. Les Dudek for those who are.
Oh, I love Les Dudek.
For those in the crowd that are a little bit older, Les Dudek, right? Spooky Tooth, Jack Bruce. You were saying you love Les Dudek?
Free. He did Free.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah. So I mean, Andy Johns was just awesome. May he rest in peace. The legend, producer, engineer that he always will be. We can just listen to his recordings forever and go, wow, that guy knew how to get great music recorded.
And the styles, when you go from Les Dudek to Rod Stewart to a Television, and then you get out, you start ending up with Godsmack, and you can make all these different bands sound fantastic. I mean, that's just the mark of a genius. And the one thing that the one album that he made back in the 80s that a lot of people have forgotten about is a band called Tangier, an album called Four Winds. Probably one of my 20 favorite albums ever. That album is just fantastic. It's too bad that band was a walking disaster. They changed vocalists, I think, 3 times on 3 different albums. They, toured and then disappeared. But wow, what a band! Do you remember them at all?
I remember Tangier. I don't remember
Before we,
specifically, any of their songs, but I do remember the name.
yeah, great band.
I have to
Bill,
go check them out, man.
yeah, you definitely do, and you've got to check out Gothard because we're mentioning Gothard on our next episode, and you've got to check out Black Star Riders because that's a great band. Anything else we need to check out?
Man, I would invite everybody to check out my Flood the Engine project.
That's what I meant.
It came out not too long ago, and it's at floodtheengine.com, or you can check it out at leverty.com. My new song's called Strong, but always go to firehousemusic.com and check out what we've got there, our last album, Full Circle, and we've got some tour dates this summer, so we hope to see everybody out there on the road.
Yeah, that's a great thing, and we're going to keep working on getting FireHouse to Heavy Montreal. The goal is Heavy Montreal 2016. That's we're working on it. Going to get you there.
I love it, man. Let's do it.
Absolutely, Bill. Always a pleasure, and of course we'll do this again soon. In fact, you have agreed to come and help me with the Gothard interview, so that'll be fun. We'll hear that next episode. But there you go, folks. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mitch. See ya.
That's what we need. See ya. Cheers.